In this episode of Opal Wave MTG, we're going to take the Mishra's Burnished command Precon, and we are going to make 2 rounds of upgrades. The first upgrade is going to keep it within that Skirmish tier. We're going to just make the deck a little bit more focused with what it wants to do, but as far as the power level increase, it's not going to be super substantial. The second round of upgrades that we're going to make to the deck are going to upgrade that Precon into the battle tier. I didn't want to try to upgrade it to the glory tier because it essentially would be a brand new deck, wouldn't really look like the Precon anymore. But if you're interested in seeing the difference between the two, let me know in the comments below. I would be happy to do that. As usual, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Let me know what commanders you want to see built across the power level spectrum. And with that, let's go ahead and get started. The face commander for Mishra's Burnished command is Mishra, Imminent 1. It has at the beginning of combat on your turn, create a token that's a copy of target non-creature artifact you control, except its name is Mishra's War Form, and it's a 4/4 construct artifact creature in addition to its other types. It gains haste until the end of turn, sacrifice it at the beginning of the next end step. And overall, the Precon has this really great idea of making tokens and then sacrificing them, a little bit of an aristocrat feel, and it's also got some fun token shenanigans in there. So we're just going to take what the deck is doing and we're going to make that a little bit more focused. So here is the upgraded version of the deck. I will have it in the description below. And overall, you can see it's a lot of the same cards for the most part. We've just added in a few cards that can help us recur stuff, like the Scrap Trawler. Scrap Welder is another fun one that we can use. We've added Marionette Master as a little bit of extra finishing power. And the sorceries, we've added the Rise and Shine as another finisher, Scrap Mastery, so you can return all those artifacts to the battlefield. A Trash Mastery, another way to kind of mess around with the artifacts that are on the battlefield. In the instance, we've added a counterspell as well as a masterful replication. Kind of does what the Brutaclad does in terms of the second ability, where you can choose an artifact you control. Each other artifact you control becomes a copy of that artifact. Could be a really great way for us to end the game. And in the artifacts, we added just a few more efficient win conditions. So the first one's going to be this Reaver Titan. So whenever it attacks, it deals 5 damage to each opponent, and it's got crew. So if you make a copy of it with Mishra, it's just going to be a 4/4. But the cool thing is that when you attack, you're dealing 5 damage to each opponent. So if you have 2 of these things out, that's 10 damage. And then if you use Masterful Replication, that's just going to deal a ton of damage depending on how many other versions of this Reaver Titan you have, and then the Brutaclad can do it too. So a very sweet win condition, being able to deal a ton of damage to the rest of the board. We've added a Sky Sovereign because it has the ETB trigger and the attack trigger of dealing 3 damage to target creature or planeswalker, so we get a lot of really great control in addition to it just being a 6/5 on its own. Seems really good. It's also a flyer. Then we've got this Portal to Phyrexia, which is going to allow us to really just take control of the board, making our opponent sacrifice 3 creatures at the beginning of each combat. And then the Mishra trigger is going to happen at the end of turn to sacrifice the artifact that you made a token of, and this says at the beginning of your upkeep. So you're never really going to get an additional reanimation effect with the Portal of Phyrexia. But it's still going to be really great because every turn your opponent's going to have to sacrifice 3 creatures, and it's going to be pretty hard for them to actually maintain a board state at that point, at least with creatures. We've added 2 enchantments. We've added a Clan Crafter and a Determined Iteration. Determined Iteration populates at the beginning of combat, so you let the Mishra ability resolve first, you make the token, and then you populate it. Then we've got this Clan Crafter, another just really great way for us to gain some card advantage and make Mishra a little bit bigger, since we can sacrifice the token artifact that we just made before we have to sacrifice it, and we can draw a card and make Mishra bigger. Made some really easy upgrades here. Some lands that have the potential to enter the battlefield untapped. Spire of Industry seems really decent here since we have a lot of artifacts. These pain lands are pretty cheap overall. The ones that can either make a colorless, which is really great since we have a lot of colorless in our deck, and then they can deal damage to us if we really need a color. So with the compare function of Moxfield, I'm going to show you guys the differences between the two decks and what upgrades I've made and what I cut to make those upgrades. For the Skirmish, Mishra, Burnished banner, we've got all the cards that I was talking about that we included, and now let's talk about the cards that I cut from the Precon. So first thing, let's talk about the lands first off. So the lands that I prioritize cutting are the ones that are going to be really awkward in the context of the deck. So with Darkwater Catacombs and the other lands, like they're signet lands where you like pay a mana and then you make 2 more mana, which can make it a little bit awkward if you want to like hold up a mana or something like that during another player's turn. You kind of need 2 mana in order to use this one land, so a little bit awkward with these lands in general, so I decided to cut those out. The next round of cuts for the lands were the Karoo lands, and a lot of the lands in the deck already enter the battlefield tapped, so to have another land that enters the battlefield tapped and then just returns another tapped land to your hand is going to put you back really far. So I decided to cut the Karoo lands. Fane the Broker, just kind of a low impact card, needs a lot of setup. You got to start doing a lot of stuff in order to actually get that value out of it. Glint Raker is another one that's not really contributing to the overall game plan of like aristocrats or even token generation. It's just kind of a very slow value engine, so we decided to cut that one. Hellkite Igniter, kind of a finisher in the deck, but since we upgraded the finishers and made them more flavorful in terms of artifacts, I didn't really feel the need to keep the Hellkite Igniter in the deck anymore. Expressive Iteration is just kind of it's pretty low impact. I felt like we could make room for different forms of card advantage that could also feed into the theme of our deck. Something like a Psy Master Thopterus seemed really sweet in that kind of spot, so that's what we did. Metalwork Colossus, another, it could be fun, it can beat your opponents for 10, but some of the other finisher type cards we add in the deck instead just appealed more to me, so we took that out too. The Scavenge Brawler is another one that I wasn't super impressed with. Yeah, you can potentially make something really big, but outside of that, just seemed like a kind of a whatever beater, and it didn't really contribute to our game plan of like this aristocrat token type of build. So Servo Schematic was another pretty low impacting cut, as well as the Mnemonic Sphere and the Mycosynth Wellspring. There's plenty of lands in the deck, and the ramp is also really good, so I didn't feel like we really needed the Wellspring here. Mozio is another kind of card advantage type creature that wasn't really contributing to that game plan like I was talking about before, so we gave that one a cut. Silas, again, kind of needs to get through, only has Death Touch. It's going to be annoying for our opponents to block it, but it seems kind of slow in terms of that recursive value. I wanted something a little bit more explosive, so that's why I've got like the Trash for Treasure and the Scrap Welder in addition to the Scrap Mastery. So Traxos, another kind of low impact creature. It's not going to do a ton here. Then we've got the Workshop Elders, which can turn our non-creature artifacts into creatures, but we added the Rise and Shine, which is going to be a much better finisher. This one, you got multiple turns in order for it to start kicking in, and then but the Rise and Shine, you can just pay 6 and then everything's a 4/4. It seemed a lot stronger in the context of this deck. So yeah, that's going to be the first round of upgrades that we made. Still keeping it pretty low power here in that skirmish kind of area. Just made the deck a little bit more focused with what it wants to do. Moving on to the battle version of the deck, we'll go ahead and jump right into it. We've still got the Duretti. We've added an Arkham Dogsum, which is going to be able to sacrifice the tokens that we make with Mishra. Could be really strong to drawing out really important cards in our deck, or artifacts in our deck rather. Goblin Welder, another really great card. We can sacrifice the token that we make with Mishra, get back some of our more powerful artifacts. We've kept that Marionette Master in addition as just another pretty decent win condition on its own. In the sorceries, we've added a Demonic Tutor, pretty easy include. You could also do like a Diabolic Intent since that's new in the set as well. We've kept most of everything else from that Skirmish version. They all seem pretty decent, so didn't feel like we really needed to change much there. In the instance, we've kind of upgraded the counterspell package and the removal package just a little bit. Added a Cyclonic Rift, added a Defabricate, a new spell from Brothers War where you can counter an artifact or enchantment. Or you can counter a triggered ability. Both seem pretty decent. Word of Invention as another way for us to tutor. And again, like I said, we've just upgraded the removal overall. So nothing really crazy here, just some pretty solid upgrading in terms of the removal. With the artifacts, we've moved away from some of the more like generic finishers, and we've added some pretty sweet interactions with this deck. So we've added this Gonti's Aether Heart, which is going to potentially give us a lot of extra turns with Mishra, since Mishra will make a copy of Gonti's Heart, and it's going to be an artifact creature, but it's going to have a different name. So even though it's legendary, it has a different name, so it's not affected by the legendary rule. And when that happens, you're going to end up, the original Gonti's Heart is going to enter, and you're going to make 2 energy. And then when you make the token of Gonti's Aether Heart, it's going to trigger 2 times, for the one for the original Gonti's Aether Heart, and then once for itself. So you're going to end up making 4 additional energy, and from there you need to cast or have 1 more artifact enter the battlefield, and from there you'll get 4 more energy, and you'll be able to sacrifice the token that you made, and you'll be able to take an extra turn. So as long as you can generate or make another token or another treasure or artifact every turn, you'll be able to take infinite turns essentially. The next infinite turn combo we've added to the deck is this Ugin's Nexus. So it says if a player begin an extra turn, the player skips that turn, and if Ugin's Nexus will be put into a graveyard from the battlefield, exile it and take an extra turn after this one. So this one's a little bit more convoluted, because Ugin's Nexus does say if a player would begin an extra turn, that player skips that turn. And we've got 2 ways to kind of get around this problem. So what we're going to do is we're going to take the Ugin's Nexus and we're going to make a copy of it. And then we're going to use this Ingenuity engine, and we're going to sacrifice the token of Ugin's Nexus with the Ingenuity engine, and we're going to return Ugin's Nexus to our hand. That way, when we go to our next turn, Ugin's Nexus won't be on the battlefield, and from there we can recast our Ugin's Nexus and then make another token of it when we move to combat. And from there we can use the Ingenuity engine to return our Ugin's Nexus back to our hand by sacrificing the copy of Ugin's Nexus, and from there you can just keep doing that over and over and over again until you have infinite turns. Another way we can get around the Ugin's Nexus and kind of play around that is with the Master Transmuter, where we can return the Ugin's Nexus to our hand, the original one, and put a different artifact from our hand into play. So as long as we can return, we have another artifact in our hand that we can keep swapping in and out with the Ugin's Nexus, you'll be fine. Another few really interesting includes is the Wishclaw Talisman. So you can potentially like double tutor with this with Mishra, which seems really strong. So yeah, I definitely wanted to include that. We've added a lot of like the 2-drop talismans since we had the 2 signets in the deck. We also added the Missing Izzet signet. We've kept the Portal to Phyrexia and the Reaver Titan. Both seem like pretty decent win conditions. Mindslaver is another interesting one that we added, since we can just start sabotaging our opponents and start making the game go in our favor in that way. So Mindslaver also seems like a pretty decent include here. With the enchantments, we've kept the Claimcrafter and the Determined Iteration. Both seem super strong. If you have the Determined Iteration with the Gonti's Aether Heart, that's just guaranteed infinite turns, so also seems pretty good. And then with Ugin's Nexus, you could potentially, it's going to make going that infinite a lot easier, essentially. Moving on to our lands, we've got pretty straightforward here. We've added our shock lands, our in-color fetch lands. We've added just more lands that can, enter the battlefield untapped potentially, but overall we didn't make too many upgrades in that regard. The deck already had some decent options in terms of its mana base. We do still have a few lands that can like enter the battlefield tapped, but if you really want to make that next step in terms of your land base, that upgrade wouldn't be that hard. Overall, power level is still going to be there with these upgrades that we've got here. So again, we've got that compare function where we can see the difference between the battle version and the original Precon that we started with. So you can see with the lands, you know, a lot of these lands were pretty easy upgrades here. We've added these talismans, some much better like utility type finishers, a few tutors, better removal in general, and upgraded on that theme of, you know, making tokens, sacrifice shenanigans, recurring shenanigans. As far as cuts go, we definitely started looking at cards with a little bit more scrutiny about what our overall game plan is and how we're going to win the game. And then if they didn't really contribute to that game plan in a very significant way, then I decided to cut them. At this point, we cut the Ashnod. Has some fun synergy with some of the cards in the deck, but it was just more of a for fun type of thing, as opposed to like, what is it doing for my strategy? You can keep it in the deck if you really wanted to. It just, to me, seemed like a pretty decent cut here. The Audacious Reshapers was another one that I didn't feel like we really needed at this point, since we added in tutors. Those are going to be a little bit more efficient in terms of, you know, finding the cards that we actually want to get on the battlefield, and we don't have to take damage for it. Blast Furnace Hellkite, while it could be a fun finisher, wasn't really contributing to our game plan like I was saying before. Stuff like Fane and Farad, again, these cards are fun, but they're not really they're not high impact, not cards we're really looking for. Glint Raker, another one that we talked about moving from that Skirmish version. Yeah, you can see a lot of the cards that I cut from the Skirmish version are also being cut for the battle version, and then we're just kind of taking it and applying it with a little bit more scrutiny. The lands also, cards like Trading Post, Thran Dynamo, cards that are a little bit slower. You could make an argument for keeping Trading Post in. Just wanted to make a little bit more room for upgrades and all the fun stuff that we've added to the deck. So thanks for checking out this episode of Opal Wave MTG. Until next time.